Sam, to pick up on that, talk a little bit about harmonizing. I've been struck in the work that I've done, and when a lot of us gather and work on various problems, we talk about the community, the NGO world, and all of these different nonprofits that work together, but sometimes the behavior is a little less than communal because people are out there doing their own thing or siloed or not finding ways in which they develop the kinds of partnerships that I think Charlie is talking about. Obviously, interaction is all about creating coalitions and doing that. How can we get better at addressing what Charlie just mentioned?
Well, first, thanks for the opportunity to be here this afternoon. There's something beautiful in human nature of this desire to go out and try to make a difference in one's neighborhood or in the world, and that desire to try to touch and advance human dignity around the world. And that's where civil society or NGOs have come out of. So we've come out of these individual impulses. And yet, look at the little sub-slice of broad civil society that Interaction represents. We have members with 32,000 staff. These are become enormous global institutions that are operating in sometimes 100 countries. And in many ways, we become focused on our brands and on developing the resources to sustain individual institution. But the reality that has happened over the past 10, 15 years is for the first time we are seeing the real emergence of a global movement focusing on the need to live in a more fair, just world, a recognition that the world's poor are a majority of this planet that cannot be ignored. And we've seen that movement begin to take shape in the shores here in the United States, and lots of different advocacy organizations have gotten around to get that going. And the challenge of a movement is a desire, especially with the American sort of spirit, is to be entrepreneurial, start new things. And I've sat back and looked at the Clinton Global Initiative, and everything is sort of a new thing. And the reality is there is an infrastructure of civil society around the world that is the interface between ideas that are happening here in New York and a community in Kenya or a reality on the ground in Indonesia. And in many ways, oftentimes, it's sort of, here's a partnership that happens, and then there's a mention, well, yes, we work with an NGO, and they do so that last little delivery piece on the ground. And what we're trying to do as part of the NGO community, and what's interesting about this community globally, is it's now organized so that there are platforms or umbrella groups of NGOs in some 85 countries around the world looking at standards, best practices for what is development effectiveness for the NGO community of the some 40 or 50,000 NGOs who are under these platforms. And I think the core conclusion that we've come to, and it's been a theme throughout this day, is that nothing can be done without some form of partnership. We work on the ground through partnerships. No community is developed. Communities develop themselves through a partnership with local and other NGOs. Our core, our center of gravity as a community here in the US is not resources from the US government. It is you, the American people. It is corporations. It's a relationship with an interest of Americans who in many ways, we've seen just in our community of Interaction members, a tripling of private resources coming in since 9/11 as Americans have reached out overseas. But it is that recognition that now the scale of this, as Charlie mentioned, is in the tens of billions of dollars. And the business of usual as I am starting something new, look, I am doing something beautiful on the ground is important. But I think the first question we need to ask is, well, who else is doing something in country? Where else can I work? And if someone is starting a project or starting an idea based up in the north in Europe or here in the US, who could help provide a local context? Where are the organizations that could work together? And those institutions already exist. And in many ways, I think it's misleading to say, if you look at Interaction, the US NGO community, yes, these are US 501c3 organizations, but their staffs are 90% local. This is a global movement of people changing things. And it is sad when you see the world push back, as has happened with organizations kicked out recently in Darfur, but 7,000 of those staff are Darfuri staff. It's a reality that the world itself, or humanity's response to the challenge of globalization, has been a human response organizing ourselves outside government. And while that impulse to be part of a movement and start something new is something I'd encourage each of you, and particularly the younger ones of you, to do, the other impulse should be, with whom can I work? How can I ensure that the work that I'm planning here has a voice from the individuals that it will impact?